What's going on, guys? My name is Psyche, and welcome back to Dead Cells. Now originally I was going to do something other than a brutality run, but then I thought we already started the streak of having 2 brutality runs back to back, let's just continue this trend. So today, we'll be looking at a very strange weapon, and that is Crowbar. Now if you look back on my 2.4 tier list, I believe I put it in the D tier. And the reason for this is because of its really unconventional crit condition. You do have to be running the door in order for it to work effectively, and even then, it's just a really weird condition to pull off. And originally, I thought I would never showcase this weapon on the channel. However, the recent update changed all of that. With the aspects, there is actually one aspect in the game that can reduce the cooldown of your skills to 1 second, and this includes the emergency door. This means I will have 1 second delay on the door, meaning that I can essentially place it wherever I want. However, in order to counteract this, since I'll be running a boosted version of the door, I decided to give myself a handicap. And that is, I cannot use the skill that I have in my other slot. So I know that this is the beginning of the run. My build is not really established yet, but later on, I'm going to replace the skill in the other slot next to the door to something else, and I'm just never going to use it. So this is kind of my way to balance this run. But overall, for a start, this is pretty good. I have the door in my inventory already, and in case if you're wondering if I can get any other items from shops, nope, it's just all doors. And this is how I wanted to try out Crowbar. I've always wanted to see whether or not this combo is actually viable. Theoretically, it's really not. It's a very weird crit condition, and under normal circumstances, it's just not reliable at all. After all, what can you really do with a door, even in real life? It just opens and closes. Now, given that this is a very strange build, I am going to have to run a shield. This is pretty much essential for these types of runs. I'm just really not comfortable without a shield when it comes to weapons I'm unfamiliar with. A lot of you have suggested that I play survival now. I have been considering about Tombstone. That's probably one of the few survival weapons I actually want to try out. I know it's really fun to use, so maybe I'll do that in the next showcase run. But for now, the combo that I'm going to do is to use the door, toss down the door, roll through it to break it, and then use the crowbar for the crit. Now this sounds pretty fun, except that you actually have to be the one to break the door. If the door breaks under any other circumstances, you do not get the crit from Crowbar. This means if somehow you place down a bomb, if enemies destroy it, you cannot get the crit from the Crowbar. So it's absolutely essential that you do have to roll and break the door in order to benefit from this. Now this can be extremely troublesome because when you place down the door, you do have to still break it, so that's an extra process that you have to do. Now after this run, I actually thought it's probably okay if they reduce the cooldown of the door to 1 second. Because let's be real here, realistically, what are you gonna do with it? I mean, sure, it does have some pretty good affixes, but why get it on the door when you can get it on literally any other item in the game? So this is gonna be a pretty tough curse, mainly because I'm running the door and I'm running Crowbar, which are 2 very not so strong items, I would say. And to make things slightly more interesting, I'm going to pick up the Scheme mutation. This states that whenever I deploy a skill, my next attack will do additional damage. So this is kind of how I'm able to make this build slightly fun. Like I said, this is a pretty dangerous curse. I did have to kill the rat at the last moment just to lift it, because at this stage of the game, I actually don't feel too reassured. This is not a strong build by any means, but I wanted to see if I could pull this off. So we're gonna move on to the Ancient Sewers. This is essentially my go-to route now. It's really hard for me to find a reason to go to one of the other biomes. The only reason I will go to Morass of the Banished is if I plan to fight Mama Tick. Until they fix Ossuary, I am not going back there. Another thing about the door is that it breaks a lot of the expectations you have about enemy movement and patterns in general. Because it places a door, you're not really supposed to know how it functions when you place it, and then an enemy is already aggro against you. Does it stop the aggro and attack the door, or does it just ignore it and teleport to you regardless? There's definitely a lot of experimentation that goes on with this run. And the more I play with the door, you'll see I'm getting slightly more comfortable with using it. Now, one thing that the door is actually good is that it can stun enemies. even if it's for like a really brief moment, and I absolutely do not recommend using it as stun. It's just not good. So we're gonna go into the Conjunctivious fight. I do expect that my shield is going to do half the work for me here. I'm just gonna start by breaking open the door just so I can get that crit right away and wait for the first dash attack. So this is where I picked up the Swarm Grenade. Let's be real here, Swarm just sucks no matter what, so the reason I'm putting it here is because since it sucks, it's not really too big of a deal if I accidentally use it, which should not happen. And this is where the AI of the door starts to get wonky. I'm not sure how the tentacles react to the door, and you'll see they kind of just stop by the door on the other side. And I've heard some cases where the door literally just kind of breaks the game. So here it is again, really wonky AI. I don't know what the tentacles are thinking, they're just really confused by the door. Last tentacle comes in, I'm gonna use the shield, really effective. The Bloodthirsty shield is extremely effective at dealing with these things, not to mention applying an extra status effect. Conjunctivious is gonna attack again, and in that case, she's actually the one that's gonna break the door, so in that instance, I don't actually get the crit from the Crowbar. Now, I'm aware that when the Crowbar originally launched back like a year ago, it used to do something different, though I don't quite remember how it was before, but with the current crit condition, it's just extremely situational. I don't really see a way for you to make this work. Even in some biomes, I can see that if you wanted to make use of it, you will want to go to a biome that has a lot of doors. But then again, what about bosses? For bosses, you can't really expect them to spawn doors on you, so you can't really do anything there. So this is where I'm gonna mess up a little bit. I'm getting a little bit too cocky putting down the doors. At the same time, I'm trying to experiment how these doors worked. And I know in some specific cases, it actually crashes the game. Why the door is even in the game is truly a mystery of its own. But we're gonna enter the last phase for this boss fight. It's been going on for quite some time now. And this is really because I don't have a skill to complement the door. But finally, we're gonna be Conjunctivious and we're gonna move on to the Graveyard. Again, this is essentially my go-to route for every single run now. Unless I want to be creative and do something different, I'm just gonna go here every single time. And this is where things start to get a little bit tricky. By this point, you really should have a build that's really defined already. You should have ways to easily beat the enemies without them actually attacking you. But as you can see, it's not really the case here. I've never really had to do this a lot, but I'm gonna have to rely on the shield slightly more. This is really what you have to do when your build just isn't quite strong enough. And what I found out about the Crowbar is that although it's really subtle, it has a really long end leg on its animations. I believe for the combo, it's a 3-strike combo, but on the final strike, it's extremely slow. Well, slow compared to other brutality weapons, and at the same time, it will freeze you in place so you can't do anything in the time being. We're gonna go through a challenge rift. I know, I haven't seen one of those in a long time. And mainly it's because I just have bad eyesight. But given this, when I'm going to run into a huge group of enemies, I'm just gonna back off, since this build really does not have what it takes to beat these things in one shot, in my opinion. Same goes for a large corridor of enemies. If I believe that I can't finish them off in time, I'm just gonna start parrying, or I just run away altogether. And when you're running a build as dicey as this one, you really don't want to take any risks. This is another reason why I really like the Graveyard as a biome, because you get the food shop as well as the additional curse chest, which is always a challenge. Not to mention getting a colorless item is always a plus to your runs. So here I'm gonna place down the door while I'm cursed, and I don't know what's going on down there, but as you can see, the door confuses a lot of the enemy's AI. I'm not sure why that grappler didn't even teleport to me, but as long as the door is able to distract them, I don't really care what happens. We have 2 instances of the curses left. I'm just gonna slam down here and finish off everything. And now, I'm going to do something I normally don't do, and that is go to the Scarecrow. Now, I know, I see a lot of content for Dead Cells on YouTube or Twitch, and every single time, a lot of the time, people just go to Giant and then they skip High Peak Castle, and this is what I would do by default, but I decided to shake things up. Since I had a shield, I can probably make the Scarecrow fight work, even though again it's still really risky. For some reason, I do believe the Scarecrow is the hardest second boss to fight in the game, because for some reason the Scarecrow doesn't seem to have multiple phases, and at the same time, it kind of just attacks you relentlessly. It does not stop with its rapid scythe attacks. So in every single run, I'm just keep thinking of excuses to not go to Scarecrow. Plus, you can't even skip High Peak Castle, which is kind of a downside. But today, I wanted to see how this build will work. So, judging by those resurrected archers, they do a lot of damage. Now, thankfully, one-shot protection is a mechanic in the game, so I didn't die there, but I did have to expend one of my precious health recharges. Anyways, we are approaching the holiday seasons. I'm really happy for that, mainly because finally I get to take a break. Everything in school has been so tiring for me so far, especially with transit as well as running the channel. These videos take a long time to make, even though if it doesn't look like it, but at the same time, really thankful that you guys are here with me, especially those that have been here since 1,000 subscribers. And at the same time, so glad that I can actually make content for this because Dead Cells is one of my favorite games. It might actually be my favorite roguelike game of all time. And as you can see, at the last instance of the curse, I had an extremely close call. I just barely managed to kill the things before they retaliated. So that's kind of a lucky break. I thought the run was gonna end right then and there, and that's one of the beauties about curse chests. You never know what's going to happen. You could be doing so well in a run and then suddenly everything just blows up in your face. Some people even complain about the mechanic of the curse. I do think that it's not really beginner friendly, but I ultimately don't think anything needs to be changed about it. I think as a 5BC mechanic, it's not too big of an issue as long as you know what you're doing, and I do think it forces you to play rather carefully. So it's a way for you to adapt your playstyle to suit the curse, and I think that is a really interesting mechanic. In fact, recently I've started playing Hollow Knight. This was a highly requested game that a lot of you recommended on Discord. Really beautiful art style, really beautiful music. The only thing that's a little bit of an issue for me right now is that I don't know where I'm supposed to go, though that does seem to be a selling point for Hollow Knight. A lot of you suggested that I do a blind playthroughs, and that is exactly what I plan to do. Anyways, heading into the Scarecrow fight. I know, I haven't been here for a very long time. Well, actually, I have been here last time, except I died and I didn't want to upload that run, so I guess that's that. So Scarecrow is gonna enter kind of like a different phase, except it kind of just attacks you faster. There's not really any indication of it switching phases, and a lot of it is because this fight can be really buggy, and as you saw there, it did the watering can attack, except for some reason it stuck to the floor. I have no idea why it does that. Like I said, the Scarecrow fight just feels really buggy at times. It almost feels like they should probably do some polishing on it. But given that we fought Scarecrow, unfortunately, no skipping High Peak Castle this time, and there is no way I'm going to the distillery, so we're just gonna go to High Peak Castle. Now, fortunately, at this stage of the game, I'm doing pretty good damage. And with the doors, I'm actually able to finish these guys off before they even attack, especially with those tornado guys. Those things are pretty annoying. So we're gonna go on to the Thorny Elite, and this is when I don't know why it does this, but for some reason it turns around at the last second and I manage to hit myself. And those things just do a lot of damage to you. A lot of the AIs in the game just seem really weird, especially with those Thornies, since I literally have no other way to kill it unless I use the Crowbar. And on top of that, I know this is a very minor thing, but a lot of the small details you start to notice until you play with each weapon slightly more. The Crowbar actually has a really short range compared to some of the other weapons out there. It's not as short as Warpan, but it is quite noticeable. Especially when you're trying to roll through a door just to reach an enemy, and then they get pushed back slightly. On top of that, High Peak Castle can be an extremely dangerous biome. And if there's any way you want to minimize the amount of risk that you encounter in a run, then you should definitely take it. So this is part of the reason why almost everybody I know goes to Giant. So we're gonna head on to Hand of the King. Fortunately, I did manage to find some food in High Peak Castle, so I was able to mitigate some parts of the health loss. So let's see how well we're gonna fare in Hand of the King. And really, since the door is such a utility-based skill, I really don't understand why it has a really long cooldown. I believe it has a longer cooldown than some of the turrets in the game, which literally makes no sense at all. Like, what are you gonna even do with the door? It's to the point where I don't understand why they made it scale with tactics only. Maybe they just wanted tactics to have that one skill that nobody wants to use, because I really don't know what you're supposed to do with the door. Honestly, I can see how it can be a colorless item, because if you just found some way to utilize it somehow, you could probably use it in any of the 3 colors. And now, after a really close call, I was being squished to the corner by those flags. I couldn't do anything, but thankfully I was able to land the final blow and finally end the fight. This is where I'm going to take a health flask since I still have extended healing, and I might as well take full advantage of it. We're going to go into the Astrolab as soon as I heal all the way back to 100, so it actually does a really big amount of healing. I believe it does 85% instead of the normal 60. Anyways, Astrolab time. And speaking of which, Motion Twin has recently just uploaded some teasers about probably the next version of Dead Cells. Believe this is going to be 2.6. I did think there was going to be one more DLC that came out, but maybe we'll have to wait slightly longer for that. However, from the looks of it, some people have theorized that it's going to be a crossover update similar to Curse of the Dead Gods. I believe they did one with Dead Cells a couple months back. Though at the point where this video would come out, I believe more information would have been shared with the community already, so maybe you could just ignore everything that I'm saying right now. Either way, Motion Twin showed this gif of a glitched door, so that's perhaps hinting at items from another game. As for which game it's gonna be, I really have no idea. And I'm really excited for this because it's been a really long time since we had any actual new content added to the game. The last time was in 2.3 where we had the 3 melee weapons, as well as the 3 new mutations. So it's going to be a breath of fresh air for everybody else, and I'm really excited to bring you guys more content about the future of Dead Cells. In fact, recently I've been looking into streaming, so maybe in the near future when I get some better equipment, probably from Christmas, I'm going to do some streams on the channel. Maybe I'll do Dead Cells. Anyways, we're going to climb this tower area and it's going to be really messy for me. I get hit by the laser, and on top of that, getting hit by the slammers. Really annoying, but thankfully, we do have the giant cheese to take care of our health. We're gonna top up on melees as well, gonna get rid of all the melees. I like to be nice and healthy when I fight the collector. So I'm gonna show off my build one more time. 32 stats and brutality. That's definitely okay, though it's really nothing too spectacular. I would say 32 is around the average for my 5 BC runs. Ideally, you will want probably 33 or 34, but anything within this range I would say is considered to be normal. And as for exponential scroll scaling in the game, it's definitely more beneficial to have your scroll count as high as possible. And as for this fight, I'm really not expecting any miracles here. Really, with the door, with the crowbar, what can you really do in this fight? And since I don't have another skill to use, I'm just gonna try to get in as much damage as I can. And apparently I couldn't even get the first heal in the first room. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to deal with these monsters too, but luckily, since the door has such fast cooldown, I can just place down the door, and just in no time he's gonna do the first heal. So we're slightly behind schedule now, and this is the one attack I always have some trouble dodging, is the extending tornadoes, and I just placed down the door to see how it would work, and it actually managed to block one of those tornadoes. Again, it's really strange how the door works, and when it comes to enemy attacks and bosses, the game doesn't really expect you to have a door in these encounters, so sometimes the game can bug out pretty badly. Luckily though, I think this is gonna be the third heal? No, the second heal. We're gonna get teleported to the spinning ballroom for sure. This is not a strong build by any means. I just wanted to showcase the crowbar the best way that I can, and I do think this is the way to play it correctly. Let's be real here, you're not gonna wait like 10 to 20 seconds just for the door to refresh and finally break it. Now I'm assuming it can be possible if you manage to just chain the door back to back, so maybe once the 10-second crit from the crowbar ends, you can probably just place down the door again. Though that takes a lot of brain power and I don't have a big brain. So we're just gonna do this the easy way. Entering the last stretch of the game, this is where I get a little bit too nervous. He's gonna do his normal meteor attack, and honestly, I know some people say that's his hardest attack, and I actually think it's one of the easiest to dodge. I do think the tornado attack where he spins around, as well as these extending light beams, that one always gets me sometimes, for some weird reason. Anyways, drink the flask, and he's gonna do this tornado thing again. I wanted to test out the door. He's gonna do the ground slam, and just like that, finish the fight. This is not how you're supposed to play Crowbar, for sure, but I had a lot of fun showcasing it for you guys today. This has been a really interesting but difficult build for sure. I definitely recommend you guys to try this out too. So until next time, thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next video.